All right, here we go. So this is day 3 of our 3-day workshop. That's to say 3 mornings, I think is more fair to say. And as you know, these were the topics before. And now we're moving to strategies and tactics for data sharing ecosystems. So I will give you a summary of the previous parts. And when I'm done, I will ask you what questions you have. I'm sure that it was a lot to take in. There was a lot of content yesterday in particular. And I would like from you to know from you what are the specific topics that you would like to address here or any questions you have. So be prepared, because after my summary, I will ask the group and make an inventory. And based on these questions, Michiel and I will have a conversation-style discussion on strategies and tactics based on examples we worked with and on in the previous years. So this is actually Michiel in his role as consultant, I guess. And then later on, we have examples of how all these different approaches or different contexts, different sectors have influenced the further development of our platform. Because after all, this is a capacity building workshop on Semantic Treehouse. And we will show you what we've been developing currently based on needs from the field, but also what is in store for the next year or so, or more. And finally, interoperability in data spaces. We will address that. What does this all mean in terms of data spaces? And part 1 was pretty simple to recap. It was quite a different perspective. It was how to deploy the platform yourself, which is possible if you know what you're doing. I guess that's a fair assessment of Wednesday. Then later on, yesterday, we went on what is Semantic Treehouse and what does it do? Well, I pointed out that the most important part to remember is that Semantic Treehouse is a platform. And without activity and people on the platform, a platform doesn't add much value. So in this case, like other platforms like GitHub or GitLab, it's true that it works when you have a community and when you have content the community works on together on that platform, right? And the purpose here, the type of content here are common data models that capture the semantic agreement, the agreement on meaning of data in the community. And one more final thing that I like to repeat is that both the Semantic Treehouse code base and our issue tracker is open source, so you can contribute, and you are very much welcome to when you work with our platform. I feel like looking back on yesterday, I feel like this content, giving examples was very useful. Because what is the content like again? It used to be like this, a common data model with 126 pages with an introduction, but then quickly a abstract information overview with all kinds of information elements in the data model, and then pages and pages of specifying these information elements to make sure we all agree how to use them, what do they mean, and how an example code, and even at the end, examples of how in code this and data this would look like, what this would look like. And the content now, the same thing, is viewable not in a PDF but online in a tree view at the left, going to the elements you need, and with the data per element at the right, even some example code. So this is, I guess, the core and worth repeating. This is the kind of data models we're talking about. And yes, I think yesterday it showed that it takes quite some bureaucracy. It's a maintenance job to some extent. So, and we showed that a lot of different sectors in the Netherlands are creating their own organizations for these collaborations. And Semantic Treehouse was an answer to the common challenges in that. Now, I've said common challenges so far, but not all sectors are alike, and their differences, their different needs, their different priorities have influenced the platform and have keep influencing how we develop Semantic Treehouse to accommodate those. In the recap, we also noted that we also opened the door already a little bit to the topic of data spaces, and I mentioned that data space initiatives face similar challenges when it comes to semantics. So the things we learned yesterday are applicable to a large extent on data spaces, which is important because our context here, the reason we're together is the Zero Waste project, which is a data space project as well. So we have put Semantic Treehouse in the middle of that as well. And I've introduced BOMOS, remember? So these sectors not only are alike and deal with the same challenge, but they are these people, including TNO, have come together to learn and share best practices, and we have captured those in a document called BOMOS, which is an acronym for Governance and Development Model for Open Standards. And we will use this picture today to discuss strategy and tactics. Yesterday, it was more about the operations and support of end users to support the maintenance of data models. And we used an example of one particular sector yesterday, a very mature use of the platform, a mature also community in terms of collaboration. And we've also showed, of course, at the end, a different demo for Zero Waste in particular. And today, we will focus on the more strategic aspects. And when I say strategic and tactic, it is inevitable that we leave the technology a little bit and focus on the organization part. So the summary is there's a bigger picture. We started with a tool, but we ended up touching a wealth of knowledge and experience behind the tool about fostering semantic interoperability. And a big part of which is described in BOMOS. And I see a question from Lisa in the chat. It's a good question. Is BOMOS only a document or is it also a community? It's also a community. It's written by a community and it's maintained by a community. In fact, it's just a community of Dutch sector organizations, repeatedly coming together, sharing lessons learned, and asking themselves how should we change our document that contains the best practices. And of course, TNO is part of that community as well. So the bigger picture here is important, successful and lasting improvements in interoperability requires mobilization and organization of the business community. So while I showed you all these technical documents, you might be mistaken that the main challenge is a technical one, but in my opinion, it's not, or in my experience, it's not. It is as much a business challenge as it is a technical challenge, and it's also not enough to create the content once. It needs to be maintained together. Some say you are building a commons. So this is a summary of part 1 and 2. So moving on to strategies, conversation about strategies and tactics for semantic interoperability. This is our framework. We've introduced it yesterday, and there's a lot to say about this. There are 2 blocks here, strategy and tactics. Strategy has mostly to do with setting up a collaboration, deciding on the vision and the reason for this collaboration. Like I said, strategy is about setting up and protecting the identity and the governance of the whole collaboration. And one big part of that is, of course, how to finance this. If that's said, then there's many tactics that the organization can or this collaboration can employ. But I feel like, given the questions, most of the questions are about the upper block. And let's see, we had a question about a few data space and data connected questions at the top, and then a a question from Lisa and other stakeholders at the bottom. And Michiel, I heard you say I have a few examples of that. So maybe let's start with those.
Yeah.
How to build the business model.
Yeah.
I know in previous conversations, this was mentioned also in the zero waste context.
So let me quickly draw the context here. The zero waste project, for example, is in a project phase. So models are being developed, pilots are being executed, and at some point, you need to decide whether to bring certain parts or everything to a sustainable organizational form that leaves the project phase and goes into a more a structured organization that can continue activities like the BOMOS model explains in terms of maintaining the models, but also updating where needed, taking in change requests. So the whole bottom part, that's not really suited anymore for a project phase, but then you're entering the organizational a sustainable organization phase. And a large decision to make is how to fund that. And I have a few examples from how different sector bodies in the Netherlands have shaped their organization, and in particular how they deal with financing. So let me quickly give these three next to each other, and then see whether that triggers questions or even answers the one you already raised. So one of the examples I want to give is the one of the SETU organization in the flexible staffing industry, and I believe it's been introduced yesterday, right?
Yes, correct.
So what we see there is that all standards that are being developed are freely available and can be applied without any royalty. So there's no business model in using, downloading, or accessing the standards. And that's different than, for example, standards like SEN or ISO that ask for a fee per page. So it's a different model. And the reasoning behind for this SETU organization in the flexible staffing industry is because they want to very much lower the threshold to start using and adopting these standards. And every fee is introducing a threshold, or at least a barrier to quickly and easily adopt. But that brings the question on how do we finance then our activities. And what they've decided there is that there are, I believe, six, seven major flexible staffing companies that take a large part of the market, and there's a long tail of very much a large amount of staffing organizations that are smaller in size. And the 6, 7 largest one said, well, we benefit the most from this standard that is being adopted. So we will pay in full for all activities that are needed. So there you see that the large parties basically take their responsibility, if you would call it like that, and make this available royalty free for the whole market, including their own customers. So those who are using flexible staffing, because they want that the standards are also implemented on the other side for more easy for better interoperability. And there's an additional model there introduced that also software vendors that provide software solutions in this industry, they play an important role So there's a kind of membership with a lower fee where they can get a seat at the table. So here it links to how the organization is governed. So who decides how the standards and the data models evolve. So let's say 70–80% of the organization is funded by the largest organizations, and then the rest is added by software vendors that can buy a seat at the table. So this is one of the models. Another typology that we see is pay-per-use, and here the Ketenstandaard Bouw en Techniek. It's again a sector body that develops data sharing and standards, but also taxonomies and also maintains international, tries to adopt international standards in their industry. And they have a model where if you want to use the standards, you need to buy a subscription. And these fees are very low in when you are when your revenue of the organization that's applying the standards is lower. So it's a staffel, if that's the correct English word, based upon your revenue. So a very large organization, building company that applies these standards needs to pay a larger fee to the organizations compared to a SME or even a single builder who works on his own. And what you see here is that even if you are using a software solution where the standard is applied, as an end user, in our terms, a data space participant, also needs to pay because indirectly they use the standard. And this is so compared to the SETU, where they have a small number of members that finance the organization. In the Ketenstandaard organization, they have several hundreds, I believe around 800 members that pay a yearly fee to do all the finance the standardization body. So that's another typology. It raises it has advantages, disadvantages. For example, it makes it the barrier to start using the standards a bit higher, but at the same time you have a direct channel with everybody who uses the standards because they have a subscription, so you know who to contact, who to involve. So it's also in terms of community building and visibility of the added value you provide for the market. It has a significant benefit. And the third typology that I want to mention is something we see in the transport and logistics sector, where a open trip model is developed. And this open trip model started as an initiative by a few market players that came up with a good solution for interoperability problem. That solution was endorsed by a public body, the Ministry of Transport and Logistics, and is then further adopted by the market. And there's now you could say an active open source community that maintains this model. So there the organization that needs to be funded is very small in size, only maybe arranging a few meetings, but not the actual development and maintaining of the standards. That's being done by the community itself. But a bit of facilitation is done by, in this case, the the sector body that was already active in the transport and logistics sector. So they take this as a small activity, and allow the do some coordination, but the main work is done by the open source community. So there again, no fee to use the standard, but also no fee to participate in the development of the standards. You can just subscribe to be a part of the working group and then start contributing there. So I would say 3 different models, each of having their advantages and different disadvantages, and they strongly also relate to the building block on how you govern this organization in who decides. So I hope this gave a brief overview of different typologies that we see regarding organizational setup and how to fund those activities.
Well, just wondering, based on what would you then decide which one is the most appropriate? So is it, I guess it depends a bit on the sector that you're working in. So it's the agri-food sector. It's a very long one. It's many small players, I guess. So there's I wouldn't say that there are a couple of big companies that would benefit most and could fund most of it. So the first option, I don't easily see it working. Mm-hmm. But just my first hinge, so you have more, would be happy to hear your view on it. Pay per use, I don't know which use that you need to then be able to identify the use very easily, I guess. So how do you choose the most fitted one? I guess the third one where the government at some point endorses it, I guess that sounds to me like something that might be important.
Yeah, it helps, but for the other parts, for the first 2 examples I gave, there's no explicit endorsement nor public funding, so it's not a prerequisite. It's not a guarantee to success. It helps, but to address that first part, yeah, it's the toughest part. In terms of setting up such an organization and getting commitment and getting the governance right. It's the hardest part from going from project phase to a sustainable maintenance of your assets. And I'm not fully I'm not involved in the Zero Waste project and fully aware of the agri-food sector, but I can imagine that there are already, and I know there are, standardization bodies that are active. So I would say the first question here is whether it's appropriate to set up something new, or maybe find a house where you can bring in the results of a project. So it's not definitely needed to set up something new. It can also be that valuable results from the Zero project are being handed over and to an existing organization, and that's an easier path if it exists. It's not always the case, but if that's a possibility, then that's something you could first explore. The second point you raised was on defining pay-per-use, and indeed that's difficult. For example, if you specify use per transaction, and we're in a data space setting, so it's a distributed peer-to-peer setting. Yeah, there's no centralized solution where you could track and record use. Although there are solutions like in the data space components, a clearinghouse is one of the components that might be of a solution here. if you really want to do pay-per-use per transaction. The example I gave from the built infrastructure body, Ketenstandaard in this case, they specify use as in you've implemented the standard. So whether you send out one, you have one transaction a month, or maybe 100,000 a week, it's still it's both classified as you use the standards, benefit from the intellectual property, so you need a subscription. And there you see that smaller companies, based on revenue, pay a way less fee. I can give you the sheet, for example. I think it's nice to get an insight. If you take a look at the page that I sent in the chat, you get an idea about the figures that they the amounts for the subscriptions to start using this standard. So for companies that have a revenue less than 1 million a year, it's free to use one of the standard sets, in this case the DECO standard. So that's the second table. If you are in between 1 to 5 million revenue a year, then you start paying 429 euros a year. So you see this model only works if you have a large user base and a large a subscription base. Otherwise, you won't raise enough funds here.
Which would be the case. Yeah, go ahead.
Michiel's point brings us to another point, is that there's a certain life cycle to this. So we are talking about the step from project to sustainable, but of course there are other phases after the first phase of being sustainable. You can grow into different constellations.
I think maybe another nice example to give here is, and it relates to also yet another governance model in the smart connected supplier network. So the smart connected supplier network is a data space in the smart industry domain, and there the setup of the organization is that the service providers, so not the data space participants, so not the end users, but the service providers pay the fee, and for the whole data space and the shared services that are provided that are needed in the data space, and these service providers are also the main decision makers in the organization.
They represent a group of participants.
Exactly, yeah. But that's completely different compared to the example I gave in the flexible staffing industry, where the major staffing companies, so not their software vendors that provide connectivity to the data space, but the end users, in this case the staffing companies, they say we will pay the fee and we decide how the standard should evolve, and software vendors need to adopt. And in the smart manufacturing setting, it's the initiative started with the service providers seeing this need, wanting to be more interoperable with each other, and they represent their own customer base. So the model is completely different, but at the same time works for them. So it really is sector dependent or context dependent what works. And to come back to your question, Lisa, then how to decide? Yeah, that's a tough one. In the BOMOS model, several options and pros and cons and characteristics are given, so that helps. But then it also becomes an activity of exploring, having discussions on what model will work in your domain.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I don't know if we have time for it later on, but it would be interesting, I think, to have this discussion with the SIL1 members to hear which players do they see already active, where could it potentially be, like which standard bodies could maybe be potential partners to launch this. Do we reach out to them and those kind of questions? But Erik, you also wanted to contribute.
Yes, I would like to recap what Michiel said, and that, in other words, we provide a decentralized approach which allow to bring comfort to a group of participants to have a representative as a local central coordination point. So depending on how strong the participants are, they can act on their own, or they can join someone who is representing them to bring comfort, or to bring it as a service. So this is one of the strong points of having a decentralized approach, which allows local collaborations. And I think the use of subscriptions is a very simple mechanism in contrast to pay-per-use, which will be very complex when you are scaling up. So it depends strongly on the stage where you are, from project to implementation or scaling up, what kind of approach you need, and subscriptions is the easiest one.
Before I give you the floor, Caroline, I am writing along. I hope this helps. I have said here about common data models, but it struck me that this is about more than semantic interoperability, right? We are talking about the whole framework, the whole collaboration here. So the same things can be said about setting up a data space.
Yeah, and there, if I may quickly respond to that. Sorry, Caroline, go first.
No, I was just thinking that it also seems like in the examples of yesterday, like SETU, that the need of the main actors in the value chain was so clear, and yeah, how do you go about when you still need to do true needs elicitation? I think from your actors, and yeah. But this is just a thought out loud. I think we're really in a different stage of implementation now with our SIL1. Yeah. Maybe a question to you, Michiel, is do you see that this needs elicitation is something that you fully need from the beginning, or can it be iterative?
Yeah, a very nice point you're touching upon, because that makes it that gives an additional layer of complexity, especially in moving from project to organizational phase, to operation. And for example, in this flexible staffing industry, it started in 2007 by the biggest need of the industry is to provide interoperability solution for timesheets, because that was on paper, and timesheets, you have one timesheet per worker per week. So in terms of business transactions, and also in data transactions, that quickly scales up, and you see also the potential. You feel directly the cost efficiency of not having to manually process timesheets, and being able to fully automatically process that in your IT system. So the whole it all started with timesheet, and then came the invoicing, and then came the other purchase to pay steps from and now and I think that maybe that was also discussed yesterday. Now you see this more mature, and we're talking 10, 15 years later, this more mature organization and collaboration here can handle complete new innovation and digitization challenges for the sector. So they've reached this point where they have a sustainable model and now exploring all new kinds of use cases. So that's this I think in business it's called the killer app, or the perfect use case. Yeah, that really helps also in getting commitment and funds and visibility and everything you need to make it a success in going from project to organization to operational phase. And some organizations or some initiatives are stuck in there for a very long time. And others quickly can quickly bridge that chasm. I don't have a silver bullet here.
That's not expected. I think it's interesting to have
and
to
you
open
also have the opportunity to switch gears a little bit and let Michiel, the consultant, disappear to the background, and let Michiel, the product owner of Semantic Treehouse, go to the forefront. And the benefit of the latter is that you'll see how the platform has, or the development of the platform has responded, or we responded, to these strategic questions that differ between application, differ between sectors. My apologies. So I think, Michiel, that we can continue with that part. So if you can put on your product owner hat for a minute.
I will.
And show us an example of what these discussions and the different decisions that every sector made, how those rolled out to or influenced the development of the platform.
I will, absolutely. So what I wanted to show you is the following. I've prepared a lot of options to show and talk about. Probably we'll get to one or two. But as I said, related to this strategy of how do you fund your organization, and that implies that you might have a subscription model for your standards. That was the case that we discussed on Ketenstandaard, but also for the NEN. These communities using Semantic Treehouse, we needed to come up with a solution to deal with this subscription model, because we've designed a platform that provides open standards with some access control, but not with the whole payment and subscription model. So how do we make that connection in terms of deciding who can access and who cannot? And one thing we said is that we're not going to build in that subscription system ourselves, nor are we going to, as Semantic Treehouse, starting collecting the funds for that. That's already being done by the user communities and their bodies. So we needed to come up with a solution, and we came up with an OAuth integration where we can link with existing CRM systems that are in place by these bodies in order to provide us the subscriptions, and we can determine if a user has access to the standards or not. And that's something I wanted to demonstrate you in this case by means of the NEN environment, but I can also do it with Ketenstandaard. Let me do the Ketenstandaard because we talked about that one as well. So what we did is for Ketenstandaard, if I access their instance of the platform, then it says you need to log in first, and I can log in with the Mijn Ketenstandaard, the My Ketenstandaard account, and now it switches to their CRM system, and because I'm logged in there, it returns back here, and I have all the access and all the subscriptions in the environment to view the standards. This is the end result. But now what's in the back? If we go to Mijn Ketenstandaard, here you saw that this is completely separate from Semantic Treehouse, not managed by us. It's the CRM system of one of our user communities. And here I was already logged in. That's why it went so easy. If we now log out and do it again. So I'm now logged out, and again here as well, log out. Then I need to log in, go here. I'm redirected to the Mijn Ketenstandaard environment. I log in, and the subscription I have are configured here are picked up by Semantic Treehouse, and I'm displayed. I get displayed the standards that I can access. So in this case, the DECO standards, but also all the DECO standards, but also the ATIM standards. And that's because in their CRM system, here I see my standards. The subscription I have are, one of them is the DECO standard, which is the OAuth integration we made to determine access. And this is for one community, and for the NEN, the Dutch body connected to SEN.
Yes, these are normal European normalization institutes, right? SEN is the normalization institute, and NEN is its Dutch counterpart. And NEN, we also work together with NEN. Thanks for that.
And they have a similar subscription. They're a subscription per standard base, and it works the same way. So Semantic Treehouse doesn't have to deal with community management, user base, subscriptions, collecting the fees. That's all done by the systems they have. So this is one example of how we've responded to a customer need, or in this case a generic need to deal with different funding models.
Yeah, exactly.
Any questions, remarks? Yeah, Lisa, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't understand yet. So do these different standard bodies then pay something to Semantic Treehouse to fund your operations?
Yeah, that's good to ask, because also the platform that we provide here as a managed service. So this is our domain, Semantic Treehouse, and this is their managed service environment that we provide. And for sure, Ketenstandaard pays us a managed service fee to operate the platform. But that's providing the IT service, not providing the standards. So their model is standards are their users need to pay for use of the standards.
Yeah. Basically, for Ketenstandaard, Semantic Treehouse is their shop where their standards are. And although usually Semantic Treehouse, like Michiel said, is usually open, we now have a way of providing the technological solution of saying, well, if Ketenstandaard wants to ask a fee, they can do that, but they have to figure out who has access to what. We don't want to do that concern in Semantic Treehouse. That's why we have these system connected the way that Michiel showed. So what Michiel showed was from a user's perspective, but indeed, there's a different side to it, and that's the collaboration between Ketenstandaard and TNO, where we provide this platform. Two separate topics.
And so the end users, they also go through this platform. So you actually have a view on how many end users are using the standards in the end. So you have a total view. That's quite interesting, no?
Yes
Yeah,
and no.
We can at least see who's actually viewing the standards. Not if they implemented that into their operations themselves. So that's we're providing design time, a design time solution. How these standards are used, that's out of our picture. Indeed.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, not yes, from the Semantic Treehouse point of view.
Yeah.
But later on, after 11, I will
Yes.
explain how this can be observed within the data space.
Cool. Very nice. All right, then if you allow me, I would like to at least show one other aspect how we responded to customer need.
Yeah, I think that will be the final example before our break.
Perfect. Then I will share my slide again, and here I'm taking one step back, and I believe this slide is shown yesterday or even the day before. Where one of the crucial modules, or at least most valued modules in Semantic Treehouse, is the validation support.
Yeah, we skipped this particular one, but we've covered the basis.
Okay. Yeah. Because what we see is that when organizations really need to start implementing the standard, then it becomes hard. And you want to check and know if you've done a good job, if you are complying to the standards, and that's where the validation module comes in. It provides a service, integrated service, to check whether you comply to the standard or not. Gives a detailed report on validation rules that are being violated, etc. So again, design time component, when you are implementing the standards, you can check, test it out, and that is also one of the challenges that we see in all communities, and it relates also to the BOMOS model here in the left bottom corner, where validation and certification is one of the implementation support services that you can provide to your customers. So on the one to your community. So on the one hand, we have integrated several validators in Semantic Treehouse, where you are using XML-based data exchange or JSON-based data exchange or RDF based data exchange. Semantic Treehouse has a validator integrated for all these kind of syntaxes. Again, I'm picking customer or community Ketenstandaard here, and they said we want to go one step further. So yes, validating is nice, but we want to offer certification services to our community. So basically, if you do a right job, you can get a certificate from us, from Ketenstandaard, saying this organization complies to this and this version with this standard with this version. And they said we want to publish that online for others to see who complies to the standards and which interfaces they provide. What we've done, again, we said Semantic Treehouse is not going to develop a certification scheme, gather all the publish this. This is something that Ketenstandaard wants. So what they've done is they, in this Mijn Ketenstandaard, which I showed you already, they've added a section where you could start the certification process, and you need to give several of your data sets you need to upload there, and
examples basically.
examples, but you need to comply or explicitly say that these are real examples from your system. So not this is your implementation. You provide these data sets, and under the hood, there my environment uses the validator provided by Semantic Treehouse. That's the single source of truth of the standards. And if the report is you're okay, then in the main Ketenstandaard there's a final check by one of their community managers. Does this make sense? Yes. And then that organization is being published on dataquality.now, where it's specified this organization complies to this and this standard with this version. And every year they send out a request to this list. Please verify again that you're still complying to the standard. Repeat this process. You just need to upload a dump of certain data sets, and the process repeats itself. So based upon the validation support, they wanted to have a certification service, and we said, well, we can provide an essential building block in being able to provide that certification service.
Yeah. Can you go back, Michiel, as a closure to the gray orange? Yeah, this one. I hope you can appreciate after Michiel's story that how the Semantic Treehouse validator, which was actually supposed to help developers check if their implementation was all right, was used in an entirely different way, namely for certification of the whole organization and to provide others in the market with a list of organizations that support the standard. So thanks very much for these two examples. All right, so this is the last part of, or part 6 of the agenda. Michiel has left us for the session. Erik and I will now talk about interoperability in data spaces. We will show, I will start now. We have until 12, and I want to have some time for conclusion. So maybe we have half an hour, a little bit more for this topic. And I want to start by making the connection between Semantic Treehouse and data spaces a little bit more explicit. And I know Erik also has some things to say about interoperability in data spaces. So data spaces is integral to zero waste. So I don't know how far we have to go into introducing the topic. But it's good to note that data interoperability is a key challenge for data spaces as well. And it returns to this commonly referred to blue-green picture in two places, in the technical blocks and the business and organizational building blocks. Now, that shouldn't be a surprise after the 2 days we've had, that interoperability has to do with organization and technology. The same duality can be seen in the BOMOS frame. And here again, there's another similarity with BOMOS because the DSSC, the Data Space Support Center, contains a wealth of knowledge and experience about data spaces and setting up data spaces. And a large part of that is described in the DSSC toolbox and the DSA blueprint. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the project, so I've included this slide for later consideration if you don't know DSSC well, and I highly recommend looking into that because there's a lot of valuable resources, I think, there. But back to data spaces. From a technical point of view, I like this picture. It's a bit old, and it's also on the technology side, but
Wouter, may I step in? Because I would like to use a different visualization.
Yeah, that's fine. We've discussed this, that you would say where you think your piece fits best. So go ahead, Erik.
Thank you. I use this slide deck for several meetings before, so perhaps a lot of you have already seen them. What I try to explain here is the classic way of system integration, where you have an application A, B, and C, and we have several interfaces via the internet. What we provided in the beginning was what we call the Zero Waste Data Space version 1. And I show this picture because in the middle we have something that we called a connector. We already have identified the vocabulary hubs implemented by Semantic Treehouse. But this name connector is a software component. And there has been a little change. So semantically, we can still talk about a connector, but the new situation is more like this. We have a control plane and a data plane. So these are just architectural terms, but what I try to say is that the function of a connector in the past has been distributed among other applications, and one of them is the service catalog, which is intertwined with the new standards that we are using. And here I would like to make the connection with the vocabulary hub, because if we go into the service catalog, then we see that the connection with the Semantic Treehouse and the semantic models is just an URL. So to summarize, what's the connection between Semantic Treehouse and a connector? Well, from a technical software point of view, there is no connection. They can act independently. But when we look at the service catalog, a catalog where you can find which applications, data, and services are available, then you can specify for a service which kind of semantic model you would like to use. And this is a URL. And if you click on the URL, you will end up in Semantic Treehouse. So back to the first question, how are data spaces and connector connected technically to Semantic Treehouse? The answer is via the service catalog with use of a URL. So also back to the question asked earlier, are we able to see who are using a model? Well, from the vocabulary hub, you can't, but in the service catalog, you can trace which services demands the use of a specific model.
Yeah.
Again, also in the zero waste data space, we do not record or track how much or how many times you use a semantic standard. We only see which services demands a specific semantic model or message definition. So that should also resolve one of the questions before the break.
Yeah. And I can't help but tell you that sometimes at TNO, when we start dreaming, we dream of much more data about what parts of the standards are used by participants, because it's like the holy grail for the maintenance of those standards. If you can back up decisions about how to change them with actual data. We are not there yet. This is very early research, but this is definitely one of the big questions.
Yeah, one remark on that. When you look at this picture, you might get the impression that a service catalog, there's only one, and a vocabulary hub, there's only one. From a theoretical, technical point of view, you can have multiple service catalogs and you could have more than one vocabulary hub.
Yeah.
The current practice is that we are already very glad if we have at least one vocabulary hub. So there is not much need to have two vocabulary hubs. But in theory, it's part of the decentralized architecture. Practically, we only have one vocabulary hub, but you could have multiple service catalogs. This is also with the design in mind that we do not only want to scale up within a data space, but we also would like to connect data spaces to other data spaces.
Yep.
So, and then you definitely need a decentralized approach, and this makes it difficult to track individual use of data streams and models. So it could be a dream of TNO, but it's a real challenge.
Yeah, no, that definitely. That's what our dreams are based on, of course. And this, I think, this touches the question asked, I think, by Andra, which was, if I'm quoting you right, what about varying data, right? Different data, maybe something about something else than food loss, waste, or loss. That touches the same topic of data from different contexts, from different data spaces. Maybe something from the health data space, if you are deciding on the impact of certain happenings in the agri-food sector on public health or something like that.
Or more directly related with the logistic domain or production or retail domain.
That makes more sense. Thanks.
And so the retail domain is a world on its own, but in the end, some of the food needs to end up with a retailer or needs transportation. So crossover of data spaces and domains seems very natural.
Okay, so thanks for that setup.
Okay.
Back to my rather outdated picture, and still I've decided to show it.
Yes.
Because it says the same thing, basically, Erik. You see that because there is some metadata about the connector, so what is offered here, actually the arrow should probably be going to the metadata broker, because that's where these metadata is collected. And part of that metadata is pointed to the vocabulary hub. And in fact, I'm also showing this picture because years ago, when we were in talks about the beginnings of data space architecture, we saw that others had started the conversation about this strange component called a vocabulary hub. Right? This was before 2020. And when we looked and talked about what does it do, we came up with something like this: a platform to host, maintain, publish vocabularies for data. A universal location where you can manage data schemes, enable collaboration, and to harmonize and create a common set of standards for a given data space. Now, I hope this sounds familiar by now, because this is exactly the functional specification description of what we had been building for years before with Semantic Treehouse. So I want to just make explicit here that before 2020, we saw two worlds collide, basically. One was our world, we knew at the left, mostly oriented nationally in the Netherlands, very much rooted into our contact with different sectors and with a best practice described in BOMOS. The other, emerging, a European initiative, with other terminology like data spaces, but also with a description of best practices and knowledge sharing in the form of the DSSC building blocks. So I guess it comes as no surprise. So there are basically two sides to Semantic Treehouse, and these two sides have their origin a little bit into these different worlds. The left is clear blue. I think that represents the maturity, the high TRL. Michiel mentioned Ketenstandaard. Our colleague Linda mentioned SETU. We called NEN and a few others. Together, there are hundreds of unique business users per month using the platform in the Netherlands for their interoperability challenges. The other side is more colorful, but also less defined. This illustrates the lab side, the development and research side of Semantic Treehouse. I remind you, TNO is a research and technology organization, so we translate challenges to technological solutions, and Semantic Treehouse is no different. But we are always on the lookout for innovation. So the left side is very important, but the right side is our core business, I would say. Finding challenges or finding solutions to new problems, and the data space initiative or the data space world provides with a lot of new directions for development. And if Michiel were here, he would be able to, as a product owner, tell more about this, but I will do so in his stead. I think I can summarize the development of the Semantic Treehouse in 3 topics based on 3 problems we see in the data space world. One has been, I think the upper one is already mentioned by Erik, right? How do you add meaning to all the datasets catalog? I mean, you can see who has published it, what are the users' policies and that sort of thing, but you also need to be able to communicate the meaning, the semantics. So the solution is to integrate semantic treehouse or have it play nice with the catalog. And we expect in the coming months to create a guidance document on how that works and what that looks like specifically, so technically. The second problem is a contrast with what we've talked about when we talked about Dutch sectors and BOMOS, which is that in some cases, data spaces kind of equals data exchange with people you don't know that well. So the level of familiarity, the level of trust is not, you don't know these people as well. Just like with SETU, all these people were in contact with each other, and if they weren't, it was easily established. With data spaces, depending on the context of the data space, this might not be the case. And that means that you are on a crossroads, because do you first start with the organization part that Michiel discussed with us, with these hard decisions to make, or can you already somehow get started? And I think you need to do both, but you can get started with Semantic Treehouse regardless. And this is the solution part. We are designing for a completely different workflow. We would like to call the bottom-up approach. And we've done this already within SAIL and with Miran. And even yesterday, my final demonstration already hinted towards that. This means no starting from a common standard. This means just taking a data sample from your system and to Semantic Treehouse and generalizing a model from that. Is it a standard then? No, of course not. But now you can compare, like I showed you yesterday. Now you can compare it with others, and maybe collaboration can start from that, from the bottom. So that's one workflow that we are adding and have been adding for a while based on our experiences in the data space projects. And the final one is inter-data space interoperability. Also already touched upon briefly in Erik's part. It just means data sharing between data spaces, between different contexts. And ideally, you would like, I already mentioned this yesterday as well in our demo, ideally, you don't want to be restricted in what vocabulary to pick, to choose, or what standard to choose, just because that one is loaded into the environment. You want to have access to different vocabulary hubs, because perhaps in the logistic data space, you have the data model about transport you need for your agricultural use case, right? No need to reinvent the wheel. Interoperability is hard enough as it is, so we need to foster reuse by creating a federation of vocabulary hubs. That's a very expensive and fancy word for a simple idea. Just make them more findable. What if we could easily find the work that other people are doing by federating the vocabularies, by making them talk with each other. So these are 3 lines of, we could say, research and development that are influencing and deciding largely our roadmap for Semantic Treehouse. And of course, this is in contact with our parties and resulted from interactions like the one we have today. Erik?
Yes, I would like to stress out that within Zero Waste, we are still focusing on our own business, our own doings. But when we talk about data exchange, the chances are very high that you will encounter the logistic part or the retail part. So I even think that the data exchange will be stronger between organizations outside our data space rather than inside our data space, because we all need transportation. So therefore, it's very important to think about how to open up, not only within your own group of organizations, but also to be accessible, findable, and collaborative with others from outside your group, from outside your data space. That's what I wanted to point out.
Yep. Thanks. So my takeaways from this part that I would like you to have is the basics, which is Semantic Treehouse is an implementation of the vocabulary hub, and that makes it ready to be used, more than ready to be used in data spaces. There is a warning that I wanted to give here, and this has to do with the requirement of collaboration. So some data spaces, and not all, but some data spaces are like an infrastructure without a clear community, and this is fine, but temper your expectations when it comes to interoperability in that regard, because data spaces with low levels of trust or contact between participants usually mean low levels of collaboration, and you need collaboration, you need the human side of things to really achieve higher levels of data interoperability. If you don't have that, that's fine. That means that, it will take some time to process data. That's okay. It needs to be cost efficient. There needs to be a business case, but please lower your expectations. I see a lot of conferences, talks that talk about seamless interoperability, painless interoperability in data spaces. But please know about the limits of what's possible, especially in contexts where there's low familiarity between participants.
Yes, and if I can add
Sure.
to that, this is beyond identification and authentication. If you know that someone is not impersonating, but it's the real deal,
Yeah.
that's not enough. You also need to have not only the same language, the same semantics, but you also need the organizational aspects in line before you can do business. Otherwise, it's just a name, perhaps a verified name, but that's not enough. So trust is also an organizational and sometimes also a legal interoperability aspect. And this is very often forgotten to mention, because it's known, but it's when they are talking about seamless interoperability, they don't mention these aspects like organizational and legal.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, No, thanks for that. I think this wraps up the takeaway slide because I've expanded upon the last part here before. So if it's okay with you, I would like to bring us to the conclusion. This is the last slide. I think I've showed you 100. I don't know if I should say you're welcome or I'm sorry. I think I really like that Andra in her answer or in discussion used the word leadership, because I agree that it's a form of leadership that's required because it's such a multifaceted or multidimensional transition that we are talking about here. And I really hope that in this capacity building, we have given you one or two ingredients for that leadership. But there are many more, and in particular, one that we cannot provide, and that is intimate knowledge of the domain, of the stakeholders and their drives and motivations. So that's why I conclude here with a slide on please find us, but also the knowledge that might help you going forward and decide on these smaller next step, like Sasha said. What would be the small step at this point? You can use the BOMOS for that, which has been published in English in a recent last month, which I'm very happy about that coincidence. But also the DSSC. And I quoted here a song that came into my that I thought of, actually played into my head when I was making the final part. Nobody said it was easy. I think it's a shame that we have to part. I really enjoyed this these 3 days. And we will share the recordings and the slides so that you can go back to the start if need be. I have one final request, and that is please help us refine this workshop with your feedback later on. And with that, I think I played my role, and I want to hand over to you, Lisa.
Thank you very much, Wouter. Thank you very much, Erik. I think I feel that we went from something very tangible and concrete now in the last part back again. We zoomed out a bit and it became again a bit more abstract, but it feels like it's a nice full circle that we came. So thanks to you. Thank you also to all the participants here today and in the last few days, Andra and Sasa, for gathering everyone to join us for such a very specialized topic, I dare say, with something that doesn't bring immediate solutions. It's a long-term thing, and it's only the baby steps, I guess, that we're taking. So it's really cool to see how it's been done in other sectors and the advancements that TNO has made in this field and the research that they're still doing. So yeah, I think this was a very nice capacity building activity, and I'm very happy that we were able to organize it like this. So
yes, thanks for organizing very much.
Yes, much appreciated.